I had spent my entire life hiding my dyslexia and stop connecting it to low IQ and accept that this is nothing more than people that learn differently.
35% of entrepreneurs, 40% of self-made millionaires on the planet have got dyslexia. Jamie Waller, multi-millionaire, philanthropist, friends of Richard Branson. He's built and sold massive businesses, now changing the world by making people aware of what to do about this.
I had a letter just a few weeks ago from a mum whose 12-year-old boy had tried to commit suicide because he just felt that he was a burden.
This session is all about how to unleash the power of thinking differently, for either yourself or the people around you.
It was me that cried. The reality is there's two different types of people born into society, and that is explorers and exploiters. 15% of the population are born exploiters, 85% are...
Jamie Waller, the dyslexic edge. Right, you have taught me some things, and one of the things, I've just got to bring this up first, over 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic.
That's right.
Is that a true statistic? Because 98% of the statistics are made up. Is that one true?
That is, done by the US Dyslexia Association. 40% of self-made millionaires, 35% of entrepreneurs, 15% of the population, but unfortunately, so are 50% of all UK and US prisoners.
Correct. I had those written down as well. You've just rattled them off. So 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic, 15% of the population, 35% of entrepreneurs, and 50% in prisons. I suppose, what does that tell you about dyslexic millionaires?
Well, I guess the interesting thing is that they are capable, right? So if you think about, if you ask the average person on the street what they might think of dyslexia, and they believe that it equals low IQ, well, the statistics, I think, speak for themselves. That's just not the reality.
No, it's not. And do they make up for it in other things, in robustness, in resilience? Does it give them a strength?
Well, it's an interesting thing. So if you sort of typed into ChatGPT or something, give me the top 10 traits, the successful traits of dyslexic thinking, it will give you a list of traits that include resilience, thinking about a big picture, ability to take knockbacks and all of these things. Now, one of the things I did when I came about to write this book a couple of years ago is I went out and interviewed a bunch of academics, and I came along across a professor called Dr. Helen Taylor who works with me on the book. And Helen had done this amazing research over years and this whole thing around, the reality is there's two different types of people born into society, and that is explorers and exploiters. 15% of the population are born exploiters, 85% are born explorers. Now, if you think pre-500 years ago, before we invented this thing called learning, then the explorers would be celebrated all the time. There were people that going out, finding new territories, trying to find food, etc., etc. And whenever they succeeded, they would bring it back and the exploiters would exploit it. Now, if you look at the traits of an explorer, they match identically to the traits of a dyslexic person. So we believe that dyslexia is nothing more than a badge that was given to something much later in life, because we decided that those explorers couldn't learn in the way that we're designed, which is typically reading and writing. And the way we would deal with that is, rather than change the learning system, which would have been far too difficult for, you've got to remember the education system was predominantly designed by the church. They could have changed it quite easy, but rather than do that, let's just badge it as these people are a bit thick and don't learn that well. It said, I get parents writing to me every day since I've been communicating on this subject for the last year, telling me that what their children are going through. I had a letter just a few weeks ago from a mum whose 12-year-old boy had tried to commit suicide. This lady reached out to me on LinkedIn. This is a 12-year-old boy trying to commit suicide because the school, now this was a terrible case, but the school in Hertfordshire here in the UK, he was going from primary school to secondary school. There wasn't a secondary school to accept him, so he was currently out of school. And his way of dealing with that was to take an overdose of tablets, because he just felt that he was a burden. He thought that he was thick. He thought, that he was believing what he'd been told. I was told I was thick. I spent some time with Sir Richard Branson, who was told he was thick. All of the people that I interview in this book at some stage, actually there's one person that I interviewed in the book that wasn't told they were thick, but they were told that they were that they lacked care and judgment, and that was Sir Charles Dunstan. But Sir Charles Dunstan was good and fortunate enough to go to very good fee-paying schools where they didn't want to lose a customer by telling him that he was thick, so they just dressed it up in a different way. But the rest of us were all told that we were thick, stupid, disruptive, and we simply didn't know. We couldn't do what our peers could. Yeah, I had a teacher say to me, I grew up in Bethnal Green in East London, and I had a teacher once say to me, if you don't start to focus, all you will ever do is drive a van for a living. And I remember thinking, what's wrong with driving a van for a living? Like, in Bethnal Green, the majority of the people were unemployed, or drug dealers, or gangsters. Driving a van was seen as a success. But I remember I responded to him in the school corridor saying, I will have people that drive vans for me. There's a difference. And I honestly believed that. But I only believed it. The thing with dyslexia, it's very easy to find 75-year-old white men tell you that they're dyslexic, but look how successful I am. It doesn't matter. The truth is, dyslexia affects us all very, very, very differently, right? So I dealt with my dyslexia reasonably well compared to most because I had a really supportive mother who just kept on ingraining me in that love and confidence is all a child needs to succeed. But you think of, I interviewed the black farmer, Wilfred, for the book. He emigrated here, I think, age 7 from Jamaica, one of 7, living in a 2-bedroom flat in Birmingham. His way of dealing with dyslexia and getting through schooling was a lot different from mine. Or Chef Philly, the winner of MasterChef, who comes from Indian heritage, being female, going home, going, Mum, I think I'm dyslexic, and being told, don't be stupid. You're just not trying hard enough. Get on with it, sort of thing. And everybody has a different way, their own ways of coming through those very difficult times of childhood. But it hasn't changed. It's the same for, Sir Richard Branson, who's in his mid-70s now, as it was for me, who's 45, as it was for one of the younger people I interviewed in the book, Chef Philly, who's in her mid to late 20s.
In the book, there's one on the dyslexic techie, designer, farmer, capitalist, retailer, billionaire, hotelier, creative, another billionaire, a dyslexic chef that you've just mentioned, the vintage dyslexic, a vet, a social entrepreneur, and obviously yourself. So it's basically
save the worst for last.
Save the worst for last. No, but where I was going with that is, it's in all walks of life. It's in all industries. Yet, look at the success that people are having. How are they having so much success? What's their secret to getting through this?
Well, they're generally finding almost everybody that we interviewed they found their North Star in somebody else. So they all had somebody close to them that they admired, and for me that was a guy that lived in a block of flats opposite me in Bethnal Green that used to supply frozen food to Indian restaurants. But Barry, who lived over there, always drove a convertible car, so for me I could see that as a sense of achievement. I thought, well, if you worked for yourself, you could buy a convertible car. He still lived in a council flat on the 4th floor opposite me, but he had a convertible car, and that meant something. I wanted a convertible car. And, you talk about Sir Charles Dunstan, even Sir Charles Dunstan with the great upbringing and education that he had an uncle that worked in the IT industry that was his guiding star, that was his, I want to be like that. And that's what's really important. But what's important is that those people, I guess, these people that don't know that they are, but they're mentors, that these mentors are within touching distance, because what you don't want to do, for example, is you don't want to walk into a primary school in Brixton and put Sir Richard Branson on the stage to tell them that they can achieve anything, because they just believe it's unachievable because of the massive difference in age, in the way he looks, in the opportunities he had as a young person in life. The same way you wouldn't want to put Stelios, who I know very well, in front of people in Harlow. But if you put me on a stage in Brixton, having grown up in Bethnal Green, have no education, grew up in a 2-bedroom flat above a shop, poor, stabbed growing up, etc., etc., then people can relate to you. So what I'm quite keen to do is not just tell the story of dyslexia at a very high level and expect everyone to believe in it and go away thinking, well, I can achieve anything. I want to tell everybody's stories from all different walks of life, different races, different ages, different sexes, different levels of success. Yeah. So you're right, there's a few billionaires in there, but there's also people that are right at the beginning of their entrepreneurial journeys, like Richard, the dyslexic vet of pickles. You know, great entrepreneur, second time round, very resilient, first business having been sacked by the VCs. But, you know, just so that people can feel that, well, if he can or she can or they can, then maybe I can too.
Some people are not diagnosed with this, are there? Some people suspect they've got it.
Yeah.
How do you know if you've got it?
Well, I think I always get asked this question, as I sort of, how does somebody know that they're dyslexic? Everybody that's dyslexic knows that they're dyslexic, and they know from a very young age. Now, what we have to do is try and get them comfortable enough to go and get diagnosed, because with diagnosis will come help, and with help comes confidence, and all of these people need is confidence. I myself wasn't diagnosed until 36, so I'd sold my first business. I had spent my entire life hiding my dyslexia, not wanting to be found out. I knew I was dyslexic. And then when I sold my first business, I made tens and tens of millions of pounds. I woke up in the morning and thought, what do I want to do? And I had done an executive business education program at Stanford while I owned my business. And I thought, I want to go and do an MBA. But I only want to do an MBA with one of the best business schools in the world. So I wrote to Harvard, Stanford, and LBS. Harvard ignored me. Stanford gave me an online interview, and LBS asked me to come in. I did the 2 interviews. Stanford said no, because I was going to them saying, look, wouldn't it be great for you to take a successful entrepreneur that has no education at all, not one GCSE, nothing, and give them the opportunity to do an MBA? What good that would do for your brand? Harvard were like, who does this guy think he is? We're Harvard, we don't need help with our brand. Stanford at least entertained it. LBS said, come in. And I went in and I put together all these big A3 boards, and I presented to them, and I put them all around the room, and I convinced them. But at the end of the interview, they said, do you think he could be dyslexic? And I thought, they found me out. And I was like, no, of course not. I'm not dyslexic. I just grew up in a troubled area. My mum had cancer. My dad was an alcoholic. It was tough. And I gave them all these reasons to believe that I wasn't dyslexic. And they said, would you be willing to undertake an assessment? And I said, yes. And when I got to do the assessment, I tried really hard and not to get found out. I tried really hard. But it came back that I was dyslexic. Of course I was dyslexic. Now, LBS accepted me on the program. Unfortunately, it only lasted 10 weeks because I simply found it too difficult. There's a reason that it's a post-grad course and not for somebody with no education at all. But I gave it a go. But actually in that time period too, I'd already set up my second business. So I was like, well, what do I want to do? Sort of learn the theory of business or just carry on getting going and doing it myself.
What were you being tested for when I've never done the dyslexic test, but look, it's resonating because I got to say in this, we've got twins and we're suspecting Emily has got dyslexia. Now we've not had her tested because they've got to be older than 7 anyway.
That's right.
And she's 8, and the school won't test her directly because it kind of has to come from parents, I think. So we're doing everything that your mum did, with the confidence and love. You said I got nothing but confidence and love from my mum.
Yeah.
And that is a really powerful statement to everyone listening right now, whether you're a parent, whether you're a manager, whether you're a leader, whether you're a business owner. Confidence and love.
It gives me goosebumps just hearing you say that, because I've got 2 daughters too, 7 and 8, and actually one of the reasons for writing the book was that we suspect that my 7-year-old is dyslexic, and I thought I wanted to come out of the gates fast so that if she is and when she is tested, that she doesn't see this as a negative. So as much as this book was for everybody else, it was also for my daughter, because I wanted her to have understood, as she saw me sit at a kitchen table for 2 years. She saw me fly to and from Necker Island to speak to Richard. She saw me go and interview Sir Charles Dunstan and billionaires and millionaires, and them come to my home and me go to their home. I wanted her to see that this wasn't an issue. And that's, for me, that's all I want to do. I just want, the book is not written to convince anybody to, it's not written telling the education system they need to change. That would be far too easy, and it would be a useless book. Yeah. The book is written so that people just think differently about dyslexia, stop connecting it to low IQ, and accept that this is nothing more than people that learn differently. It's not a deficit, but equally it's not a superpower. I don't come from that camp either. Yes, it has great strengths attached to it, but don't be mistaken. Those with dyslexia will have a negative impact every single day of the week still, whether it be they're a child or they're an adult, because of their dyslexia, and we need to recognise that. And as to not testing your daughter, and I haven't tested mine either at this stage, there will be a time when you will know if it's right or wrong to test her. And again, the book or even all of the work I've done over the last few years, I wouldn't know when that time is. Only you will know. And sometimes I wonder if I should have done it by now with my daughter, who's just going through 8+ assessment for her school. And I've chosen not to. And I've taken the approach that until the school approach me and say, we believe, then I won't consider it unless I feel that it's really going to give her some help.
Look, I suppose that the confidence and love is a confidence factor for me as a parent, you know, for me as a business leader, for other people around me. Give people confidence and love, because it's something that can affect people's confidence, isn't it?
Oh, massively.
Dyslexia, because it's reading and writing. And just tell us through some of the things that to be aware of. For even if some people are thinking right now, listening, am I dyslexic? Some people are thinking that.
Yeah.
What should they be looking out for?
So 2 things before I go on to what you should be looking out for. I think it's really important. You can see it in people, and people get very nervous when they're asked to do things. And one of the things that I've started to talk to people about now is, if you think your parents might be dyslexic, talk to them about it. Don't let them go to their grave with it, because they probably know they're dyslexic. They've just been hiding it from the world. Right. And one of the best days of my life was when I came out and said I'm dyslexic. But I had to get the confidence to do that. Now, I was very fortunate. I'd sold a business. I was independently wealthy, etc., etc. But we should convince people to do so. But what are the signs? I mean, one of the best signs is that when people have really scruffy handwriting, if it doesn't feel right, this person's really bright. Why is their handwriting when they're up on a whiteboard? Why is their handwriting so bad? It potentially because they're deliberately disguising their spelling errors with their handwriting. Ooh. Now, I grew up in an era where GPs are very bright, but nobody could understand their handwriting. So guess what I did? When I was a child, I decided if I made my handwriting so terrible that nobody could understand it, nobody would see that I couldn't spell. And no one would see that or classify me as not being very bright. But there's obviously that. Those with dyslexia are very good at communicating. So if you're talking to somebody, it could be your child, it could be your wife, it could be your husband or your mum or dad. But if you're speaking to somebody and they prefer to come back to you vocally all the time, so if they prefer to talk, if they're very, they're using stuff to tell their story. When they write up on a board, rather than using full-tone words, they might draw a bit, they might use colours more and stuff like that. So those that are dyslexic thinking are quite creative in the way not only they disguise their dyslexia, but how they communicate with the world. So you'll find these little signs, especially in children. I mean, it's wonderful actually to watch it. So I was somebody once said to me when my children were about 4 or 5, do you think either of your children will be dyslexic? And I said, in front of my wife, I said, I'd be disappointed if that one of them's not. And my wife was a bit like, why did you say that? And I honestly believed it. I honestly wanted at least one of them to have dyslexia, because I believe that with the right support that it can be a gift, that it does enable you to be different. Now, I've got ADHD too, so I've got to be careful that what I'm wishing for isn't just a replica of myself, because that comes with loads of sleep issues.
We go in there next. We go in there
stuff
next,
like that.
Welcome to the BizX podcast, sharing with you all of the secrets and winning formulas in both business and life, with powerful lessons from guests like Frank Bruno, Nick Jenkins, Brad Sugars, Bianca Westwood, and many, many more. Yet, the sad reality is that over 80% of you aren't subscribed yet. And if that's you, hit the subscribe button now and help us grow this channel so that you can get 1% closer every single week to achieving your dreams in both business and life. Let's do this.
But look, for me to sit here and honestly say to you, James, I wanted one of my children, at least one of my children, to be dyslexic, will hopefully go a long way to show your viewers and your listeners that I certainly don't see it as a problem.
Yeah, there is that side of it. I think people are still processing it. So your wife was saying to you, well, why would you say that? Are you saying that because of all of the potential opportunities that it brings people?
Yeah, because I believe that having witnessed, my wife is dyslexic too, so the potential for one of our children or both of our children to be dyslexic was very high. But I just believe that with dyslexic thinking comes creativeness and comes a different way of doing things. Right. And I think it's a great way to live if it's focused in the right direction. Now, we can't ignore that 50% of prisoners are dyslexic, right? Now, my children hopefully won't be in that statistic because loving parents, investment in good education, in the right place to grow up and stuff like that. So I'm not, a hand on heart, not saying this lightly. I know that if you're like my mum and dad were, if you've got no money, you're in council house where your school options aren't great, you probably don't want one of your children to be dyslexic, regardless if you're dyslexic or not. You simply want them to be able to conform in the environment and the infrastructure that you've got available to you. I'm very fortunate that I'm independently wealthy. I adore my children and my wife, and I can give them that start in life where I think being dyslexic will have its benefits.
Well, you have prevailed. Now, I don't want to major on this. I don't want to go into any detail on this, maybe later on, but you've not just built and sold one business. You've been involved with many businesses that have got to that point.
Yeah.
So you've not just had one success, you've had serial success. And people want to go and look in your Wikipedia page to actually see that. And you connected with really traditionally successful people. Whether you say success is about fame or fortune or happiness, you got to put that in the equation as well. That's the thing I got from your mum, actually. Let's talk about your mum. So, chapter 14, the chapter on Jamie Waller. 2014, your mum died.
Yeah.
Of cancer.
Yes.
And then you went and found your old school reports. Why did you go and find your old school reports?
Well, it was weird, actually. So Mum died, we were clearing out her house, so we lived in rented accommodation, so we had to hand it back, obviously, quite swiftly after the death. And my girlfriend and I, who's now my wife, were sort of clearing all of this stuff out, and I was pretty ruthless. For whatever reason, I was just like, let's get it. We'd ordered a skip, just get it all in the skip. And as we were emptying the loft, she had kept all of these cards and letters. When I went off travelling for a few years, before email, I was handwriting to her and stuff, or it was probably email was invented, but she wasn't using it. And she'd kept all this stuff. And then amongst this were my very early day school reports. And yeah, it was a big moment for me because I didn't want to be emotive in this clear out exercise, but then it is quite emotive when you realise that people have saved all this stuff because it meant something to them. But I saw these school reports saying, I was getting A's and just certificates coming out of, they must have been falling out of my pockets on the way home at a very young age. And then as soon as the education system went for sort of grading you for your effort to your ability, it just knocked all of my confidence out of me. And then on top of that, when you go from your primary school to your secondary school and you can't go to the school you want to go to because in their eyes you're not bright enough, which meant all of my very good friends went off to Rains Foundation, one of the better schools in Bethnal Green. I went to St Bernard's, one of the worst. I walked into St Bernard's, was getting bullied from day one. I turned from being bullied to becoming the bully. Eventually stopped going to school. I was pretty much out of the school system for about 14 months in total. And then obviously, eventually, you just end up unable to catch up. And I felt, the reason it was emotive for me, Jez, because I felt like I let my mum down a bit. She tried really hard. She tried her best. We had an alcoholic dad at home. She couldn't leave him because he always provided, always went to work, put money on the table, put the roof over our heads. But I did feel that I could have tried harder. What I did is I rebelled against the education system. I thought, well, if you're not going to invest in me, I'm not going to invest in you. That in hindsight wasn't the best thing, and I'm quite strong on that message today. People always go, oh, education doesn't mean anything, it's what you do in the real life. Don't make any mistakes. Having a good grounded education will make things at least easier for you in life. You might not get further, but it'll be an easier route there. So I felt like I let her down a bit. I felt like I could have done more. And of course, by the time she died in 2014, I was successful, but I was right in the mix of running my first significant company. I employed a couple hundred people. 2024, so 14, so 10 years ago, so 35, so 35 when she passed. But I was right in the mix of it, and she wrote me a letter actually that I opened on the day after she died, and in that letter was, please don't work yourself to death, there's more to life. So she went to her grave not really seeing my full potential. She went worried about me. She could see that I had money and I had businesses and I employed a couple of hundred people, and I was in the paper every now and again or on TV. But what she didn't see is quite soon after I got married, I had 2 children, I sold my first business, I set up another, sold that, I now own 13 others across the globe. And it would be just simply amazing for her to have seen that. I guess I listened to that advice in that letter.
And you listened?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
What changed?
I was really fortunate that I'd met my girlfriend a couple of years before. It was quite funny actually, because about a year and a half into our relationship, I said, we got onto the subject, but I said, for me, marriage and children isn't a thing. And Madeline was like, are you sure? You waited a year and a half to tell me that? Not ideal, right? And then we had this discussion, and she said, look, I can understand marriage, not got an issue with it, but children, that's a no-go for me. So we decided to try for children. And then when we decided to try for children, I thought, well, I shouldn't do this to her. I should ask her to marry me. So I asked her to marry me too. And I think, it's a package of events all at the same time. My mum dying of cancer, I was a carer for her for 14 months. A new relationship, me trying to work out how my new girlfriend was putting up with this guy who, if he's not working, he's caring for his mum. If he's not caring for his mum, he's in the hospital. I can't get hold of him because he's outside a chemotherapy room, and he's doing this and he's doing that. Occasionally he turns up. Sometimes he doesn't turn up to our dates because he's forgotten. And the whole package of events made me just stop and go, well, what actually matters? But don't get me wrong, I simply had to make money. I grew up with one North Star, which was to be wealthy, because I didn't want to be poor. I didn't want to grow up like the people I grew up around.
It's amazing, that drive, that not wanting to be poor. There'll be some people listening right now that are exactly that. I'm sick of being poor.
Yeah.
I do not want that.
And they shouldn't be ashamed of saying it, right, James? Because I think people go, well, what motivated you? And a lot of people would go, well, I just wanted to do good in the world and stuff like that. But there's nothing wrong with simply wanting something for yourself, not wanting to be poor, or I wanted to be rich. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, obviously, once I've made my first bit of money, since then I've gone on. I was really fortunate. I was supported by the Prince's Trust as a charity as a child myself. And fast forward to about 6 years ago, I got invited by the then Prince of Wales, our now King, to set up a department at the Prince's Trust on his behalf. And I went into the Prince's Trust and set up this department called the Enterprise Network. We raised a couple of million quid in 2 years. We were going in and out of prisons, in and out of less advantaged areas, helping young people set up businesses. And that has been wonderful. But don't get me wrong, I still wake up every morning and I still want to succeed by making money. And there is nothing wrong with that. And I wish more people would just be honest about that, and rather than try and hide behind this, I'm just doing it for all these other reasons. There's something quite powerful about wanting to do something for yourself.
Is dyslexia a thing of the past for you now, or is it a thing of the present? Are you happy that you're dyslexic?
Yeah, I'm happy that I'm dyslexic, but but it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect me in some way every day. Now, as I said, I also have ADHD, so it's difficult to know which one which one's getting the best of me.
Just assume myself and the listeners know nothing. What is ADHD?
Well, I mean, to talk to you about some of the average things that you will see in ADHD, obviously I'm constantly on the go, find it very difficult. I hyper-focus on things for a very short period of time. Actually, I saw something the other day. I wish I had the props here to do it for you, but it was a great example. This person lit a candle, and to the camera they said, this is a normal person that's chosen to focus on a new hobby. And you watch the candle burn very, very slowly. And then they clipped to another scene and said, and this is a person with ADHD, and it's a sparkler. And I thought it was just brilliant, actually, because it's the same. And as it was sparkling down, they said they're buying new kit, they're investing in courses, they're doing this, and then it just burns out.
Is your next book on ADHD as well?
No, no. The dyslexia thing was, as I said, I believed one of my daughters was going to be going through it, so that was my sort of stomach wrenching. I should do this. I was opportunistic. Sir Richard Branson and I were talking about it, and we were just talking about dyslexia, ADHD, and sleep disorders and stuff like that. And he was like, "Why?" And then later on that night in a bar, he was like, "Why don't you just do it?" And I was like, actually, yeah, why don't I just do it, right? So the next few days I spent some time researching it. Has anybody else done it? And it's amazing because most titles on dyslexia are all written by academics telling you how it's a deficit, how you need to do this differently, that differently, the education system needs to change. No one's really taken the approach that we've taken, which is, let's forget about all that. Let's focus on the people. Let's get them to tell their stories. Let's forget about, we do have some ground cutting research in there, but the real nuts and bolts of the book are people's real stories, their real life stories. So if you think Kelly Hoppen, who features in the book, ex-BBC Dragon, her childhood in South Africa through to being an interior designer for some of the most famous big projects in the world. Duncan Valentine, we spoke about it earlier, Theo Paphitis, the founder of Kinko Print, there's a chap in the US, Paul Orfala, who was brilliant. Paul, I reached out to all of these people cold and said, look, will you allow me to interview you for the book? The only person I knew before was Duncan Valentine. And I was lucky, they all said yes. So I found myself on a flight to Santa Barbara to meet Paul, and Paul set up Kinko Print, which was a copy shop, go in and get some photocopies. And he set it up with $5,000 and it floated for 4.2 billion later on. Now I'm sat in Paul's garden eating pizza in Santa Barbara for 6 hours interviewing him for the book to get that access. But to his mind, so how was it for you, Paul? How was it for you as a child? And to try and tell someone's life story in one chapter isn't easy. So you spend months and months and months really editing this and getting to, well, what's important for the reader? And not one person I interviewed had any editorial rights at all. None of them have seen it until it was in print, right. Which is really important too, because I think if you're going to write a book, you've got to have the purchaser in mind, you've got to have the reader in mind, and it's really difficult to. Could you imagine getting 14 dyslexic entrepreneurs to agree on a book? It would be a complete nightmare.
But you brought us into the picture there. You brought us into the movie. Sat eating pizza in Santa Barbara. 6-hour interview with Paul. Yeah. Paul, yeah. Did it get emotional?
Yeah. So you're taking people's life stories. Now, Paul is quite a tough cookie, so Paul didn't get emotional, but there are other people that I interviewed in the book that, yeah, tears were shed, because you're asking people to talk to you about their parents, about...
Don't tell me which people, but I do want to know about the moments, when the tears came out, what was it that they were mentioning?
Well, let me tell you about this one, actually, because this, and I can mention a name on this. There's who we brand as the social entrepreneur at Chapter 13, Kate Griggs. So Kate Griggs is the founder of a charity called Made by Dyslexia.
Right.
And she's a brilliant entrepreneur. She set this thing up, and she's got Keira Knightley, Richard Branson, all of these people supporting it, Jamie Oliver. So, and I interviewed Kate for the book, and we were sat in Annabelle's, which is a club here in London, and I asked her, well, what made you want to do this? And she said, well, I'm sorry if I get the name wrong, but it's Ted or Teddy, her little boy. But she said, I was reading to him one evening in bed, and he was 6, 7, or 8, and he said to me, "Mummy, what do I need to do to not wake up in the morning?" And she just paused, and her heart froze, and she was like, "What did you say?" He said, "What do I need to do to not wake up in the morning?" And she was like, "What are you talking about? What's wrong?" And he was just fearful of going to school because of his dyslexia. And I got emotional interviewing her. It was me that cried. And actually,
I'm there now.
Yeah.
I'm there,
but honestly, James, I also shed a tear twice during the editing process, writing that bit in the book. It was really just so lovely of Kate to share it. But so impactful too for her to share that, because I told you a story earlier on where someone wrote to me just a few weeks ago, their 12-year-old tried to commit suicide. These are real things still going on.
Look, what we're saying here is pay attention, be aware of these situations, because this is not just occurring in that one person's world with little Ted or Teddy. This is occurring all over the planet. It happened last night during reading to kids. It happened somewhere, but what people need is the know-how of how to deal with it. And I think, and I know I'm labouring on this, because you said this earlier on, love and confidence. That's part of the ingredients of dealing with it, surely.
Absolutely. I mean, young people in particular that are struggling with the school system and conforming to what's expected of them in that environment need to understand that there's nothing wrong with them. If there's one message that can go out from this podcast, or the thousands of bits of communication I'm doing, is that people that have been given this branding as being dyslexic need to understand there is simply nothing wrong with them. Learning was created by us humans. We created it. They don't have a disability against something we created, right? It's just a badge that governments have given to it as a convenient way to then allocate some funding and say, we've dealt with it. The reality is the system was designed for not everybody in mind, and that is not their fault, and they need to be told that.
Yeah, I'm saying the system in mind. I mean, that's like, our little girl gets this. I mean, as silly as this may sound, it's not silly. This is real. Because she's got a twin brother,
Yes.
Elliot. They're the same age. They were born 1 minute. She was born 1 minute after Elliot. And they do spelling tests at school. And they get given an amount of time. But it takes her a lot longer to read the question than it does for Elliot to do it. And that's the system. And then things snowball, don't they? Didn't do as well as my brother, didn't do as well as other people in the class. I'm in the bottom set. Oh, we're all together on this table now. Things snowball, and it's a reality. Is it anyone's fault, or is it the situation, the system? It takes someone like you, though, to break the system, to give confidence. Because, I don't know, am I correct in assuming, but please correct me if I'm not correct. So I'm not trying to be correct. But am I correct in assuming that initially people that might be dyslexic, or that are dyslexic that don't know about it, are lacking confidence?
Yeah, of course, because they try to hide something. So the best way I describe the day I came out and said I'm dyslexic, when I had the confidence to come out and say I'm dyslexic, the best way I can describe it is what I hear of is when a homosexual person comes out and says I'm homosexual. It's a big.
I came out.
It's a big day. I came out. So that's what I hope from this book. I hope I give people the confidence to come out, whether it be with their 70-year-old now, 30 or 13. It really doesn't matter, because as soon as you do, you can then just start to lean on people for the help that you need to get through society. That, let's face it, I could simply come here today, James, and say government needs to change the education system. People have been saying it for years. It's never going to happen. It would be nothing more than self-promotion for my book. I don't really care about people buying my book. And I should add, if anybody's watching or listening that can't afford a copy, reach out to me and I'll get you a copy for free. This is not about selling books. This is about giving people the confidence to understand that there is nothing wrong with them. Dyslexia is a term that was created just as a convenient way of putting a badge on a problem that we created the problem, us humans. When we created the learning system, we simply got it wrong. And we've never been willing to unwind it and redesign it. We've had every opportunity to. People say to me, well, will it be unwound now and will it be corrected now? We've got AI. No, well, why? They still haven't accepted spell check. They're not going to accept AI. Yeah, you'll get a few little scores on the peripherals doing a few little clever things. But I can come back here in 20 years' time and it's not going to be any different. There will still be sitting tests. My niece, I was at Sunday lunch with my family this weekend, and my niece has just done her 11 plus. 2 sets of papers, an hour and a half each. You try to get a dyslexic person to sit down for an hour and a half and do 2 written papers on the bounce with a 10-minute walk around the playground for a rest in between. It's never going to happen. So that means that, that dyslexic people are just massively not thought of in that whole process, which means that less of them are going to get to go to grammar schools and more of them are going to go to different schools that are got different people in, and you do end up with those that can't learn in the traditional fashion do end up with the genuine disruptive ones and the ones that don't want to learn, and then where do they go? They might get bullied, they might become the bully, they might go to jail, they might do anything. I mean, it's a terrible outlook if we simply continue the way we are.
What message of encouragement could you give to teachers right now in schools?
So it's really interesting, actually. So there was a study done in the US by the Dyslexia Association, again, on, well, what's the 2 biggest barriers to children getting help that are dyslexic? And the first one is the parents. And you think, why would that be? And if you dive into the data a bit further, well, first of all, they believe they'll grow out of it. So you start showing signs at 4, 5, 6, they'll grow out of it by the time they're 8, by the time they're 9. Johnny's a bit slower than learning because he's a boy, etc., etc. And then the second reason is that they're petrified of them not being able to go to the school of choice, because the school simply won't accept them. But the second biggest barrier are teachers. And then you go, well, why on earth would teachers? Now, you think teachers spot it as quickly as parents because they're in that environment with them for hours every day where it's easy to identify. And teachers, it came back, were worried about identifying it because they didn't want to... They'd built a relationship with little Jamie. And I think I can help him. So teachers are going home and saying to their husbands, I think little Jamie's dyslexic, but I don't want to identify because he's not going to get the help. They might change his school and he's not going to, I think I can help him. I think I can help him. So I think, the encouragement, Kate Griggs at Made by Dyslexia has done some amazing work. So Microsoft LinkedIn have done some fantastic work. They've put teacher dyslexic training for free across the world on Microsoft Learning now. So the encouragement I can give to them is go and do the course. You're supposed to be doing courses anyway every year as part of your teacher training. Do the course so that you can identify it. And when you do identify it, get behind the movement that something has to be done. Now, at the moment, that something that has to be done is that children are taken out of class, put into little porta cabins, given 15 minutes extra. I'm not a big fan of it, but it's certainly better than nothing. It's certainly better than letting them suffer. So don't believe that you can just get them through it, because the chances are you probably won't. So I think get them the help, get them the additional time, and in the background we do need to work. There are brilliant charities working on this, on getting the education to change, and I'm hopeful that it will in time.
What about in the workplace? For older people, like there might be employers listening into right now that are employed. They might have 20 people on in the business that's working for them. There's a strong likelihood that some of them are dyslexic that they're not aware of as employers. What encouragement can we give them?
It's a great question. So I did a fantastic interview for SAP, the large tech business, about 5 weeks ago. Yeah. And they asked me the same question. And I said, well, first of all, you should promote across your business that everybody that's a user of LinkedIn goes onto LinkedIn. LinkedIn have quite helpfully put on the drop down of skill menus now for dyslexic thinking. And you should get them to add it so that other people in your organization can see that we do have dyslexic thinkers in our organization, and that's a positive thing, not a negative thing. And then the second thing you can do, certainly at a senior level, is you can talk to your execs and SMT about, if we do have dyslexic in this group, what we'd like you to do is update your email signatures to reflect it. So for example, my email signature says, expect small typos but big ideas. Dyslexic thinker. Now, I don't want to tell people what to put on their email signature, but you can put whatever you like. But identify that you're a dyslexic person. Stop the criticism coming back by email that you spelt something wrong, that people think that you're lazy or rushing, when simply it was just an error because of the way I think.
What's your strapline again?
Expect small typos but big ideas.
Talk about a confidence booster. This, I mean, I love this. I mean, it starts with unleash. And the last time I read Unleash, it was in a book called 7 Strategies for Health and Happiness, for Wealth and Happiness by Jim Rohn, one of the greatest mindset philosophers of all time. And he's got a chapter in there called Unleash the Power of Goals.
Okay.
Fantastic. Probably the best chapter on goal setting ever written. And I've read a lot of books on goal setting, so reasonably qualified to make that bold statement. Unleash the power of thinking differently.
Yeah. So what's important about this book, James, is not just for those with dyslexia. So what we wanted to do with the book is give those with dyslexia something that they could pick up and gives them that confidence, makes them feel that comfort of it's not going to hold me back, actually. I'm going to go on and achieve these brilliant things too. But also what we're trying to do is we're trying to show others that thinking like a dyslexic thinker has its qualities too. So at the end of every chapter, we tear out 5 or 6 or 7 of the typical dyslexic thinking traits that person, like Kelly Hoppen or Theo Paphitis, what led to their success, and how you might want to implement some of those too. And what that enables people to do is to start thinking about maybe even employing dyslexic thinkers in your organization. Could we see an advert go out for...
Look, give us one of those nuggets. I mean, don't leave us hanging there. So let's
take public speaking, because it's quite topical for your business. But so public speaking, Kelly Hoppen will talk about how she has to get to a room early and scope it out, and then she will make various connections to various things she wants to talk about. Obviously, for a dyslexic thinker, it's not as simple. It's really difficult to memorize a speech. It's much more difficult to read one. So they're really stuck between two difficult things. Rock and a hard place. So what she did is she would go into a room and she would see, every room has a fire exit sign, right? So she would go, right, the fire exit sign, when I look there, is going to remind me to talk about my business exit. That blue chair over there is going to remind me to talk about the blue paper that I read on the best interior designs in 2017. And she would get these little things to identify it, so that when all she had to memorize was her first opening paragraph, and then she would search the room for her little clues, and each clue would bring something to life. Now that as a nugget, because it's not just dyslexic thinkers that struggle with public speaking and remember or trying to stay on subject or when they're public speaking. That's something that you don't have to be dyslexic to implement. You can implement that today as anybody. But it's a great technique for a dyslexic thinker. Yep. But it's equally great for those neurotypical. And there's loads of them in there. There's obviously the typical ones of the helicopter views. Dyslexic thinkers are great at cutting through the noise. Making decisions. I think one of the people ask me a lot, well, what makes you so successful in business and stuff. Like, how do you become a serial entrepreneur? Because, some people do it once, but how do you do it 3 or 4 times like I have? And it's, because I'm willing to make decisions. So I've got this thing, 80% quality, 100% of the time. Not great in every business, but okay in my businesses. Yeah. And I make decisions. I make decisions with imperfect information. That's something that as a dyslexic I have to do every day. Because sometimes I can't understand the information, so I've got to make a decision anyway. So it's not like I've learnt this brilliant business technique. I'm just doing what's natural to me, which is I don't have all the information. Actually, most of the time, because of my ADHD, I don't want all the information. I get bored of you telling me too much anyway. I'd rather make the decision and get on with it.
Is there any bits of advice that you give to people with ADHD? I know we've not majored on that subject, but any bits of advice that you can give to people that are suspecting they've got ADHD right now?
I might not be best for it. So I was diagnosed with my ADHD in the last few years.
It's common now. I mean, it
is.
It's in the public eye, isn't it? It's spoken about a lot.
Look, so I was recommended that I medicated for it. I decided not to medicate for it. When the consultant heard that, he was a bit confused on why he used the term, we don't know what normal feels like unless you do. And I said, well, to be honest with you, I was diagnosed because I wanted, it was an empty piece of information that I wanted to close down. I thought I had ADHD, but right. I wanted to get diagnosed, so I knew. I haven't medicated, but I'm not against medication. I also know people that are taking medication, and it's great for them. The biggest problem I have with my ADHD is it affects my sleeping. So I'm a terrible, terrible sleeper. And that is a real issue as you get younger in life. You wear a badge of honor that you can operate on 4 hours sleep a night. When you get to 45 and you've got 2 children and you're expected to be on all the time, 4 hours sleep a night gets a bit more difficult.
Yeah.
And I still operate on between 4 and 6 hours a night, and it's but it's not a badge of honor anymore. It's a real pain.
Right.
But I guess for those with dyslexia, for those with ADHD, I would say the biggest piece of advice I would have is don't turn to alcohol to quieten the mind, because there's a lot of evidence. What should you turn
to quieten the mind?
So there's a great supplement available in the UK, not widely spoken about, but available over the counter in the UK and the US, called GABA. GABA has similar effects of alcohol without the negatives of alcohol, and it simply quietens the mind to enable you to. The problem with those with ADHD is generally when they put their head on the pillow, every thought comes rushing from the day and things they want to do the next day, and that makes it very difficult to get to sleep.
Got it.
And GABA will help you fall into a deeper sleep quicker. And a lot of people with ADHD, statistics show, do turn to alcohol for that, because it has the same effect. But obviously, alcohol then it's disastrous for the quality of sleep. So you're sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, look, could be completely wrong on this as well. So, there was some thoughts that I was thinking of. Natural remedies like journal. Literally, get your thoughts on a piece of paper. Get them out of your head. Get them on a piece of paper. 5 minutes, meditate, or keeping still and silent and just controlling your thinking.
That still and silence is a big thing, James. So I think the biggest impact on my sleeping. So I on a good night I can sleep for 6.5 hours now, and I know what equals a good night. And that is to be away from my mobile phone and 3 in thought, because if I don't have time to think during the day, because I'm constantly on media or social media or responding to things, then what happens when I go to bed, my mind goes, you need to compute all this and you need to make all of these decisions. So I am a complete and utter lover of walking. I walk for the last 4 years. I walk an hour and a half, 2 hours every single day of the week. I walk everywhere, and I love it. And when I walk, I have no podcasts, no music. I use it as thought processing time, and that has been a complete game changer for my life.
It's got permeates into every aspect of goodness in life as well, doesn't it? You get fitter, you get healthier,
you get fitter. And there's nothing better for fat burning, by the way. I mean, you can listen to all the podcasts in the world about how to lose weight and how to stay healthy. Walking is without doubt scientifically the most proven for that just continuous benefit of burning fat and weight gain. So you end up with a lower percentage body fat, you feel better, your mind's free from thought, you get to bed earlier, you go to sleep quicker, you stay asleep. Everybody should be walking more.
Got a few quick questions for you to wrap up with. What's the most beautiful thing in the world?
Children.
You're the second person who said that, actually. Children laughing, the other person said there. What's the best gift you can give anyone?
Attention and love.
What's the 3 best books you've read?
Strength to Strength. More recently, a chap called Arthur C. Brooks. To put it in a better format, it's sort of the 40-year apprentice. Is how you spend your first 40 years making yourself right for the next 40 years, and how. So
you're a perfect candidate for that book, yeah. You're perfect. It sounds like I'm a perfect candidate as well. So there you go.
Good to Great.
Oh yeah, Mr. Collins.
Absolutely love it. Think Good to Great is a book that any entrepreneur could pick up and use as a blueprint for how to improve their business. They could carry it around for a year and it would only do them good. And then one of the books I read, one of the first books I read very early in life, and I'm going to say this, I don't particularly, do I need to say this? I will say this. I don't particularly respect the author much, but I read the book and it had a very big impact on me, and I read it when I was about 14 or 15, which was Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah, Mr. Kiyosaki.
Yeah.
It was mostly written actually by Sharon Lecter.
Okay.
I believe, mostly written by Sharon.
Yeah, I probably don't need to caveat it, but I feel for some reason that I should. But yeah, so there's
it's very simple concepts, and it does get you into understanding. Did it make you a rich dad?
I'm not too sure it did. I think it made me realise quite early on that you've got to be your own boss, right? If you really want to succeed. Right. So that was as much as it did at that stage. What made me a rich dad was meeting the right woman and deciding to get married and settle down.
Good point. Well said. Now look, now the listeners have listened to this. What's the first action they should take? Bear in mind, some people are thinking I'm dyslexic and some are not.
So they should forward this on to anybody that they think might benefit from just listening to this, and maybe they think that somebody's dyslexic, their mum, their dad, their brother, their sister, or they know somebody's dyslexic, so that it motivates and gives them some reason that to point towards that it's not necessarily a complete negative and that they can achieve anything.
And who should they become if they realise, having listened to this, that there's some dyslexic people in their lives?
Sorry, what was it?
Who should they become?
That good friend. I think it's really important to recognise that even, I sit here with being dyslexic, being an author, being a serial entrepreneur, having represented the king of our country as chair of one of his charities, and dyslexia still has a negative impact on me every single day of the week in some way or form. And sometimes I need someone just to put their arm around me and let me know it'll be okay. So if that's me, you can imagine what it's like for a 13-year-old in the schooling system right now.
I think you've promoted that love and confidence and that friendship and being around people and care and compassion throughout this. In fact, that's been my biggest and most favourite thing. It's be loving and respectful of the people around you, and obviously respect yourself, because there's some people that's listening right now that's thinking, I'm going for a test.
Yes.
And I think you've given them the confidence to do that.
Good. Well, I hope so.
You've definitely given them the confidence. I think you have definitely given them the confidence. What's been your favourite part
of the book writing process?
No, this interview.
It's unusual for someone to go down the whole of my relationship with my mum, which actually gave me some goosebumps, and it's something that's, I think, is really important. That there's always somebody that's made someone come out of dark times in a better way, and a lot of the time you don't really think about them or give them that time. So it's been nice for me to sit this side and reflect on that a little, and as you know, I'll walk from here. And I'll reflect on that on my walk across London home.
And you listened, but you listened to her note. And Mr. Branson, he's taught you a lot as well, so you've spent some time with him. Any words you want to say to Mr. Branson?
Well, Richard planted the seed for this book, so as much as I picked it up and ran with it, and hopefully it will change my daughter's life and many other people's lives over the next decade, ultimately, we can't ignore that if it wasn't for Richard, I wouldn't be sat here, the book wouldn't be sat on the table. So he planted that seed, and let's face it, he's the most famous dyslexic on earth. And you've never... and I say this wholeheartedly, you've never met somebody so generous with their thoughts and their time, their wisdom. If I may just tell a very quick story. So the first day I met Richard, and I was talking about my sleep issues, he said, "Oh, have you listened to this podcast, TED Talk?" And I said no, and he said, "Oh, it's amazing. It's about the sleep issues." And I said, "Oh, I'll look it up." But he couldn't remember the title of it. About 6 hours later that evening, he turned up at the bar. I was on Necker Island, and he walked through everyone, came pouncing over to me, and he gave me a torn piece of paper with loads of scribble on it. And I was like,
scruffy handwriting.
What's this scruffy handwriting? I said, "What's this?" And he said, "Oh, I went back and watched TED Talk. These are the important parts that you want to listen to." And I just paused and I said, "You went home and watched the TED Talk?" Like, I expected him to bring the title back to me. "Oh, it's called that. Go and watch it. It'll be really useful." But no, he sat there and he diligently went to the parts that he thought were the most important for me to understand, time-stamped them, wrote them down on a piece of paper. I still have that piece of paper, as you can imagine, and gave it to me. And about 5 days later, when I left, I said, "You do realise that I need to do something about this now, because you invested that time in me, that I simply have to sort out my sleep." And I did. I saw a sleep doctor, and while I still am not a brilliant sleeper, I sleep better than I ever done for 40 odd years.
He went back and he taught you exactly what to do. Wow, what a story. I mean, that is going the extra mile for other people, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we can all learn a lesson from that too, right? That sometimes it's those small things. It wasn't much of a small thing for someone in his position to go back and spend, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes of his time to do it, but it's still significant. But it is quite a small thing to simply, pass on your wisdom.
Jamie Waller, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, James.